Hello. This may or may not be working. I may be screaming into the void because I'm still getting good at Twitch. But meantime, it's Tuesday again, which means 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, you get another couple chapters of Darkbreakers. Darkbreakers is a collection of novellas, novelette, and a short story that all take place in the same world. Some of the characters throughout the stories know each other. There are connections. There are probably secret connections to all the rest of my work, but you don't have to know them. Sometimes they're separated by centuries, sometimes by continents. They're just little jokes that I like to play while I'm writing because, let's face it, a world is infinite. Even one's own created, made up, invented world can be full of all of these details throughout the timeline and throughout mythologies and countries that it's just, you can just endlessly explore it. Not that I always write in the same world. My husband always says always, but I don't. I make up other worlds. I sometimes write in this one, you know. Anyway, we're on chapter 5, Ironbound. When we left off, Gideon, that rat bastard, I love him, had driven Annalise Field out of the Breaker House party for Desdemona Mannering's birthday. He'd said some really cutting, mean, stupid things to her, and she just felt unwelcome, so she left. When Elliot, our hero, confronts Gideon about this, Gideon expresses that he is so worried this Breaker House is going to eat Elliot, that Gideon himself has already been ate a long time ago and that there's no hope for him, so he was purposely doing it to drive her out, which I don't think excuses his behavior, okay? So meanwhile, Elliot has met someone in the library, a maid, or someone dressed like a maid, pouring something out of a decanter, and he thinks of her as the woman with the moon in her mouth, and he keeps seeing her as her face shifted and her voice shifted, and she challenged him to come find him at midnight, because at Breaker House at midnight, the walls become doors. So we've had one chapter from her point of view. This is Nyx the Night Walker, Nixie, as she introduced herself to Elliot. She is the queen of the Volwoad. She is ancient and bored, and she is the one who dreams the Volwoad, kind of like the fairy world, the gentry world, the veil between worlds. She dreams it into being. If she doesn't keep dreaming it, it deliquesces. And she came upworld to Eighth, where the mortals live, just looking for some inspiration, something to jog her out of her ennui. And she meets this hot young mortal thing, Elliot Howell, who's a painter. Oh my gosh. And the gentry, it's what I call the fairy folk. The gentry, they love artists. That's why they love Annalise. That's why Gideon's so scared for her. She's a writer. Gideon himself is a sculptor, and he was taken as a child. So all of that's happening, and it's not midnight yet, though. Elliot still has to get through this insufferable dinner among the hoity-toity society people. He's just a professor, and he grew up wild like Annalise with a bunch of brothers. Not necessarily in abject poverty, but lower class and working class, so he's very uncomfortable there, but he's part of an artist movement called the Voluptuists. It's a new art movement. It's kind of against the illusionist movement from the last century. Illusionists tend to make art that makes everybody remember that there are no more doorways between the three worlds, that the human world is distinct and separate from the Volwoad, where the gentry live, the veil between worlds, and that the Volwoad is closed off from the Goblin Kingdom, Bana, the Bone Kingdom, the world beneath the world beneath. So the illusionists always like to remind you that the worlds are divorced. Well, the Voluptuists, the new movement, these upstart artists, they're like, nah. They are always making art that look like it takes place in Eighth with people but except they have gentry aspects or goblin aspects about them. It's inviting those worlds back in. It's imagining the world where all three worlds are one again. So that's the work of the Voluptuists, and Elliot is at the forefront of the vanguard of that movement. That is just in case you're hopping in on chapter 5, which is called Ironbound. So this is a Nyx chapter, chapter 5. Nyx wandered the ramble at daybreakers, her face tilted thoughtfully up to examine the yews and the junipers, the weeping beeches and the copper beeches as she passed beneath them. In Darkbreakers, this area was an orchard of precious metal trees, whose filigreed branches fruited with fat gems, cut and cabochon, of every shape and hue. But these alien trees of Eighth, these living, respiring, photosynthesizing trees, were still more wonderful. And they smelled better than Nyx's metal trees, built by goblin artificers in the world beneath the world beneath, and presented to Nyx by her downworld brother upon the occasion of her coronation. Her orchard was one of her favorite places in Darkbreakers, one of the only areas she did not have to maintain by sheer force of will, unlike the garden of glass fountains, each tuned to a different waterfall, or the snowflake labyrinth with its hedges all of ice and its pavement of rose-cut gray diamonds. And still, if she had a choice, she would have chosen to walk beneath these trees, and breathe them in and let their woodsy, greenly scents wash through her. The Volwoad had little scent to speak of. Nyx had always found it difficult to dream smells into the veil between worlds. Whenever she managed to manifest an aroma for the gentry, it was usually simple, single-minded, called from a distant memory from a long-ago visit to Eighth. She could dream this smell of lilac or loam or pine or sweetgrass, but not lilac and loam and pine and sweetgrass all at once. Scent in the Volwoad inevitably created a splash of attention. Whatever or whomever Nyx bestowed a scent upon became an instant cause for celebration, admiration, jealousy, and despair. Wars had been fought over a vial of perfume stolen from the mortal realm. But sometimes, Nyx the Nightwalker, queen of the Volwoad, ruler of the unruly gentry, exerted herself to dream a little fragrance into her life just to delight her own dreaming self, even at the cost of a riot. Now she inhaled deeply, committing this complex redolence to memory. As she breathed, the shape of her nose reconfigured itself to her longing, shrinking, widening, blackening, elongating, dampening, all depending on her desire. First, it became a rodent's nose that could sniff out food or predators or the pungent piss-musk scent of other rodents. Then a dog's nose that could track prey, distinguish territories, recognize familiar humans, but that ignored irrelevancies like fruits and flowers. Next, a bear's nose that could smell prey beneath water, beneath ice, that could find food 20 miles away, smell its mate 100 miles away. Lastly, Nyx resumed more or less a human-shaped nose, one that could follow a trail of chocolate or blood to its source. She inhaled again, with all her noses at once, and that was when she smelled tears. Curious, she followed this new scent, a solo variation on the overwhelming symphony of the nearby ocean, through the twilight. She never even had to leave the Ramble's path as it skirted past hedges of rhododendron and flowering dogwood, mountain laurel, and the blousy blue hydrangeas that paralleled the limestone and iron fence bordering 3 sides of the Breaker House property. The ocean, of course, roaring beneath the sheer drop of the cliff walk, was the 4th side of the border. As she walked, Nyx fell hopelessly in love with the hydrangeas. The varying violet shades of their profuse pom-poms were like the colors of the Volwoad. Whether she willed it or not, the veil between worlds was ever a twilight place, never day or night, but always gloaming. An opal glow suffused the Volwoad, emanating from every object Nyx had ever dreamed, and from the dreams that had come before her which she maintained, and from the other gentry, from everything and everywhere but the sky, where no sun, moon, or stars ever shone, but which contained, when Nyx could be bothered, far stranger spectacles still. The light of the veil was softly blue-violet, very much like this present dusky light of daybreakers, like the moon shining through a lacework of hydrangea petals. Nyx did not love the iron gates of daybreakers. She dug her feet in when the ramble would otherwise have carried her right up to it, and stared resentfully. Iron. So much iron. The rest of the long fence was 12 feet high, built of 8-foot-tall iron panels topping a 4-foot stone wall. Each iron panel measured more than 30 feet long. By itself, that fence was enough to keep out all but the most determined trespassers, and to keep any gentry that Breaker House might disgorge on a rare midnight penned in. But the gates of the main drive were 30 feet tall at least, and thousands of pounds of wrought iron enough to wipe out a gentry army. The smell of that gate was almost enough to repel Nyx all the way back to the house. But she was Nyx, the Night Walker, dark queen of dark breakers, dreamer of the Valwoed, ruler over all gentry folk, blessed by eternity. Her will was stronger than iron. Besides, she was curious, and the thready scent of tears was a powerful enticement. She walked on. She found a woman sitting on her suitcase at the foot of a limestone pillar bearing a great bronze lamp. Her shoulders were hunched. She was watching the gravel road where it met the gate and weeping silently. Her hair blazed in the twilight, a bonfire. Nyx sniffed, hoping for a wisp of smoke. Nothing, just goat milk and perhaps a hint of pineapple. The woman, hearing her indrawn breath, turned her way. Her neck was tight with tension, her expression fearful and defiant. She relaxed when she saw Nyx, relaxed and sagged with disappointment. But she saw Nyx, or a version of her, anyway. "Good evening," said the woman, wiping her face. "Do you work here?" Nyx glanced down at herself. Black dress, white apron, good. She raised a hand to her head and patted it tentatively. Pleated mob cap. Ah, yes, very good. A quick self-inspection elsewhere. No, she had not accidentally grown a mouse's tail or a black bear's fur whilst experimenting with olfactory reception. Very good indeed. So good that she grinned. Nyx did not think any of her teeth were too sharp or gleamed with a strange incandescence. Nevertheless, the woman's focus sharpened on her as if she knew she could glimpse beneath Nyx's glamour if she just stared hard enough. "No," she answered herself slowly. "You don't work here." "If I do, it will not be for much longer." Nyx put on a voice halfway between her own and Nixie's subservient squeak. "Who could bear it for more than a day, those people?" The woman grimaced in agreement, and in that instance, Nyx recognized her as Elliot's Anna. Annalise Field. Naturally, Nyx had followed Elliot after she drove him out of the library. She filmed herself down to a shadow and passed like a ghost through the walls to keep him in her view. She liked how her perception of him changed depending on which medium she was viewing him through. How he became a creature carved of yellow marble or rosy alabaster. How a panel of Umbrigian walnut turned him into a woodland giant, but a panel of emerald green leather made him seem a merman. How when she peered at him through a length of lustrous platinum, he was clothed all in silver, his eyes and skin and hair the color of starlight. When surveyed through a jeweled mosaic of acorn-laden oak trees, Elliot became both man and kaleidoscope. When she stood inside a stained-glass window, he was a man who was cathedral. In the dining room itself, Nyx monitored the young professor first through a large oil painting, and then through the eyes of several marble gentry babes. She was alive to his every reaction. Every twitch he made, every curl of his fingers and shrug of his shoulders galvanized her. The scene that unfolded in the red and gold dining room was all too tedious. The sniping and smirking, the overindulging, the politics, the pretense. It was like every banquet that Nyx had ever held at Darkbreakers, but far more boring. Those parts had not interested her. Soon she stopped paying attention to anything but Elliot Howell, who continued to hold her fascinated attention. His kindness, his careful touch, his attention to beauty, how he suffered to see his friends suffer, to see his Anna suffer. Elliot's Anna looked different to Nix's eyes now, in full color, out of doors, no longer a vague, marble-colored silhouette limned in gold. Watching through the eyes of graven images, Nix found had its drawbacks. She was half prepared to hate Annalise Field, this human woman Elliot loved. The tenderness of his regard might once have been excuse enough for Nix to whip up a decade of elf locks, spoiled food, shredded garments, mischievous weather, and will-o'-the-wisps or other strange and straying lights on every path to harry Annalise to her premature death. But Nix was no longer young and stupid, which made her different from all the other perpetually young and stupid gentry, and she stepped forward and sat down next to Anna's suitcase, right there on the gravel, drawing her knees up under her chin. Anna smiled at her a bit uncertainly. "Should you be out here?" Nix shrugged. "Why not? You will not tell on me. You are not of their number, I think." The Iron Gate screamed at her to flee back to Breaker House. Iron always screamed at gentry, promising pain, torture, scorching disintegration at a single touch. Nix ignored it. "No," said Anna, I was a guest." Nix frowned, trying to remember what she had learned in the dining room. It took a moment to filter through all the tedium. "You were brought in by that woman. What is her name? The one with the big hair, like—" She made a mushroom shape with her hands and gestured at her head, "like black fungus?" Annalise burst out laughing, then had to stop and wipe away a fresh spurt of tears. These new tears smelled different, Nix thought, satisfied. Her many noses rippled behind the glamour of her human nose, analyzing the chemical composition of each droplet and finding them less sharp with stress and sadness, more rounded with euphoria and relief. "You mean Miss Mannering, Miss Desdemona Mannering? I'm surprised you don't know her name. She's the daughter of the house." Nix shrugged in dismissal. "Who can tell those people apart? She is not an extraordinary one. Only 3 of you are worth stealing in the night. Perhaps one other, too, but she is too deep in hiding, stoppered up and silenced. How can she be of any use like that? You are an artist, I think?" Annalise smiled behind her handkerchief and blew her nose. Nix studied her like a cobra studying a mongoose. She wanted a handkerchief. She wanted a reason to cry and blow her nose and make Elliot Howell love her. There was much Annalise Field could teach her. Anna folded her handkerchief away. "No, not an artist. Well," she hesitated, a writer. Does that count? Do you like to read?" Nix blinked. A dangerous question. Sometimes the most reckless of the gentry dared each other to recite a human poem or to read aloud a passage torn from a human book. Such an artifact was usually kept safe under strict enchantment, locked in a copper coffer, inside a harpy's egg, inside a crystal pillar, buried at the bottom of a silver tree. But such a dare was comparable to one human goading another into drinking 60 shots of vodka in as many minutes. Few survived it. Nix was probably old enough to survive it, to sip of a mortal's fumbling grasp at immortality, their words, their images, their art, and not die of it. "Yes," said Nix, to her own surprise, "I like to read." And then also, to her surprise, she found herself saying, "I would like to read your book." Her third surprise came when Annalise Field promptly dug something out of her suitcase and pressed it into Nix's hands. A book, bound in dark blue cloth, printed with a golden crescent hanging above playful golden waves, and a creature surging out of the waters glowing by brine and moonlight. The title alone, Seafall Rising, was almost enough to drown Nix the Nightwalker where she stood. She shut her eyes fast. Annalise Field was still talking to her. She had not noticed Nix flailing in the gilt waters of her cover. Her voice came from a long way up, on the other side of the wave. "That's my first book. You're welcome to it. I don't know why I carry a copy with me, but I do. I look for any excuse to give it away. Somehow you always know when you meet someone who might actually like it. The good news is, I never know if they don't. I'll never even know if they read it or not." "I will read it," said the Queen of the Volwoad. She slipped the book into the fathomless depths of her black pocket so that she would not accidentally glimpse the title again. I will read it 100 times. I will memorize it and tell it to myself when I am lonely. It might take her 1,000 years, Nyx thought, just to make it past the first page. But if she did, once she did, and if she survived the rest, then reading such a book, finishing it, would confer upon her powers beyond even her belief. She would be able to hold millions of bellicose gentry spellbound with a single quotation, end a war with a whispered fragment chosen for its meticulous craftsmanship, its hope, its ambition, even a kind of ecstasy. I don't know, Annalise Field said wryly, that my book will hold up under such intense scrutiny. Nyx took Anna's hand in hers. Do not worry, she reassured her. There is also beauty in dissolution. Either way, it is a great gift. I thank you. Call on me at need, and I shall return your gift sevenfold. You may, she waved a hand at the house, speak my name at midnight, anywhere within those walls. I will come, if I can. Annalise Field was plainly confused, and just as plainly trying not to show it. You're very kind, Miss... Nixie, miss? Nyx was growing impatient with her subterfuge. Would midnight never come and all her tricks and deceptions end? Nixie, I hope you don't get in trouble with the house. Nyx laughed. That house could use a little trouble, do you not think? A little stirring up? Anna scuffed her shoes in the gravel. Maybe, she said, a small smile wrestling with the corners of her mouth. A very little. Just enough. I like Elliot Howell, Nyx told her suddenly. Do you recommend him? Elliot? Anna's face lit up, her smile bright as azaleas. Nyx sat up straighter, leaned back a bit, astonished at the generosity, the lack of jealousy or suspicion, the open welcome of that look. When did you meet him? Anna demanded. Did he ask if he could paint you? I'll just bet. She grinned at Nyx. He wants to paint you. You're pure, voluptuous material. In the library? He did. He does. Oh, good. Then, we'll probably meet again. Elliot is a good friend. Only, let's not meet here. Come over for dinner sometime, the two of you. My garret's a little bigger than Elliot's flat, better for company. We can roast grilled cheese sandwiches over the grate and read each other books all night. Nyx's heart pinched within her. It was as if her heart was that of a great blue whale. A heart so enormous that it beat only once every 10 seconds. A heart 600 times the size of a mortal woman's heart, but squeezed down to fit inside a mortal woman's body. Was Annalise Field one of the koboldkin, to so casually name Nyx's heart's desire and then offer it up to her? What sort of trade would she demand in return? Nyx's own seat at Darkbreakers? Her sovereignty over the gentry? Her eternal life? And for what? A grilled cheese sandwich? Whatever that was? May all the creatures of the Vale forgive her. Had Anna been truly one of her brother's people, a goblin girl of Bana, Nyx would have made that trade, on the instant. But no, Annalise Field was no koboldkin. And so, at midnight, as planned, Nyx would walk unchanged and unchallenged through the walls of Daybreakers, returning to Darkbreakers, and taking Anna's beloved friend Elliot Howell down with her. Forever. And even this terribly interesting, enticingly unfathomable darling who gave Nyx a book, Mortal Girl, was powerless to stop her. Nyx glanced toward the house. Excuse me, I am needing to return. She was anxious to see Elliot again, anxious to flee the temptations that Anna was offering her on her open palm. Thank you, Anna called after Nyx, who had already sprung to her feet, dusted herself off, and was heading back down the ramble through the singing trees. Nyx flinched to a stop. Thank you. Such scalding words, such acid words, such treacherous words to speak to a gentry who only ever did favors that would benefit themselves in the end. She lifted her voice, her real voice, and called back, You will be all right. If Anna spoke the words, if she said yes, then it would be Anna's oath to keep, not Nyx's to break. But Anna didn't reply directly. Clever child. I'm just waiting for my taxi. Should be here soon. See you around, Nixie. You are welcome to come to me, Annalise Field, said Nix the Night Walker in return, raising a hand in farewell. Know that you are welcome in my house, but I hope that you stay far, far away, for your own sweet sake. And she left her there among the lilacs and hydrangea, the iron and the stone. Okay, so that's chapter 5. I'm going to pause. Just going to go check that it's all on Twitch as it should be, and then I'll come back here after a short break. See you soon.